In this video we are looking at the LG Destiny from Straight Talk. This phone retails, I believe, for $79.99. So this is kind of a mid-level phone. This particular model is for the GSM calling area, as you can see there. And what that means to you is the fact that you'll use AT&T, so it'll be activated with AT&T. Now, for the most part, this is a 3G phone, even though it's labeled 4G. Don't mistake that for 4G LTE, because they're not the same. This is essentially standard 3G, maybe a little bit faster in some areas, is what they call enhanced 3G, which has kind of been marketed as 4G. If you're looking on the Straight Talk website or at Walmart, you may have noticed another phone that's pretty much the same as this, that goes by the name of LG Power. Both of these phones are essentially the same. The LG Power, however, is for Verizon, and it doesn't say 4G, but for the most part, the data speeds I think are going to be pretty much the same. Now, the specs on this phone are a 4.5-inch screen. This is an Android 5.0 Lollipop phone, so it is fairly new Android on this. We have 1.2 gig quad-core processor, a 5-megapixel camera, a VGA front-facing camera, which is about 0.3 megapixels or so, and it does have an LED flash. Now, I would say one of the cool things about this phone is the design. I think that's one of the highlights of it, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But before we get into that, I'll go ahead and measure it for you. I would say that this phone kind of falls under the perfect category because it fits very nicely in your hand. It's not too small that the screen resolution is terrible, and it's not too big that it's impossible to carry it in your pocket. So I would say this is in just about the right category. Now, the dimensions on this particular phone are approximately 2.5 on the width. You have about 5 inches on the height. Now, the back is a little curved, and you do have some design features back here, which I'll show you. So at its thickest point, the phone is about 1/2 inch thick. Now, the screen, as I said at the start, is a 4.5-inch screen measured diagonally. Now, the last couple of times I measured it, it came in just a tad under that. So it's a little bit less than 4.5, but not by much. So as I said, one of the cool things about this phone, really more than anything, is the design. It does have that newer Android, which I'll show you some of the differences on that here in a minute. But the design really is what's interesting about this phone. So as you can see, this phone does not have any of the typical buttons on the side or the top. The buttons are basically on the back. So that there is your lock/power button. And then these here are your volume buttons. Now, there's your camera and your LED flash, of course. And as I said, it does have a slightly curved back, and you have a little bit of a bump here where this stuff is. Now, the rest of the phone is pretty standard. Really, there's only two other things, which is the headphone jack and the charge port. There's no buttons anywhere else on this phone, including the bottom. This phone does not have buttons on the bottom. Instead, it's got the floating on-screen buttons that you've seen on some other models. And I think this is going to be somewhat typical of Android 5.0 phones, maybe. I'm not sure on that, but the first two that I've tested have had, the first two Android 5.0 phones that I've tested have had this floating button design here. Now, I will say that this phone is a pretty attractive phone because of the fact that you just don't have any ugly buttons to ruin the design. So the entire face of the phone is basically just the screen. You don't have, like I said, the buttons to ruin kind of the modern design that this phone comes with. Now, as far as the Android stuff goes, the phone is pretty typical. That is to say, there's not anything new or particularly special or basically anything you haven't seen before. About the only little extra that you get is the FM radio, and that is hardware, so you don't need data to use that, but you will need a headphone jack because it does use that as an antenna. Now, of course, you got all the typical Android stuff like Google Maps, Chrome, YouTube, the Google Play Store, and of course there you can download whatever you want, both paid and free, provided you have a Google account, of course. And next we'll go ahead and look at YouTube so you can get an idea of the video quality of this thing. And I would say that the video quality on this phone is excellent for the price. The screen is very bright and it's very crisp, and it's very easy to watch videos on this phone because of the brightness of it. So on some of these other lower end phones, you may notice in a couple of other videos I've done recently that the viewing angle is very narrow. On this phone you don't have that problem. As you can see, it doesn't change much on slight viewing angles, which you do get a problem with on some of the smaller, more inexpensive phones. Now, of course, if you go super extreme angle, then you do have a little bit of a glare problem, but you don't have a brightness problem in that regard. So I really do like the screen on this phone. It's a great looking screen. Now, as far as the speaker goes, the sound quality, I would say that the sound quality on this is pretty average. It's not terrible, but it's not the best either. So as far as multimedia goes, I would say this is a good phone for that. Okay, so the next thing we'll show you is the camera. Now, do keep in mind that this is a 5 megapixel camera, so your image quality will be fairly good. It's not going to be the best, but it is going to be pretty good. It does take some good pictures, low light and regular light. Now, originally, I will tell you that I was a little bit disappointed by the camera because I didn't see the little extras that you get with some of these other phones. And the reason for that is because you do not get them when you're taking the picture, which I will say you cannot do panorama photos with this. It does not have a panorama photo setting that I could find anyway. But on the filters, after you take an image and you go into your image, you can tap this little pencil here, and that's when you get all the cool stuff that you can do with your image. So you, of course, you can crop, rotate, and there's a few other things. So for example, here's some filters. You can apply the vintage, drama. So here's the drama filter, which is hard to see on the video, but it does give it kind of an old-timey feel to it. So you have, I think, a total of like 5 or 6 filters. I'll go ahead and read them off to you. You have vintage, drama, black and white, HDRscape, Retrolux, center focus, tilt shift, and frames. So overall, I would say that the camera on this little phone is pretty good for it being a $79 phone. Now, one cool thing that I will say about this phone is that you can tap the screen to put it to sleep. So you don't have to press that button on the back. You can just do that, and it wakes up and goes to sleep, which I find pretty cool about this phone. And then lastly, we'll show you the Maps application, so you can get an idea of kind of the performance of it. As you can see, it's very fast to zoom in and out and rotate. So I think this phone has plenty of power to run just about any app out there. There is very little lag time. You know, when you touch and drag and zoom, it's the performance on this phone is really good so far that I've found. And another thing that kind of goes with the performance, and that's the screen quality or the material quality, because on some of these lower end phones, sometimes you'll find that the screen has a slight texture to it, which makes your fingers drag a little bit slower than you'd like to. This phone doesn't have that problem, even though the screen is all plastic. It's very slick. It doesn't have that slight graininess or bumpiness that some of the cheaper phones have. So the quality of this phone is really good for the price. And here's the phone dialer, pretty typical Android. The number icons are nice and large. And then lastly, we'll give you an idea what the keyboard looks like. The key icons aren't the biggest, but they're not too terribly bad. It's not too bad texting in this format. I always find it easier like this on these kind of smaller phones because the icons are a little bit bigger. But texting on this phone is not bad. It's pretty good. It does have the standard Android keyboard. It doesn't have swipe that comes with it. So I think that about wraps this up. Great little phone for the money. I like the unique design of it. I think that's pretty neat. And it does look very modern and sophisticated considering it's a phone that costs less than $100. So I highly recommend this phone if this is in your price range. And do keep in mind that there are two identical phones for the two coverage areas out there. The LG Destiny, which is this one, is for AT&T. And the LG Power, which looks identical to this, is for the Verizon calling area.